What if everything you've ever searched for was already inside you? What if the things you chase, peace, love, abundance, clarity, weren't goals to attain, but echoes of something your soul already knows? There's a law, older than time, more intimate than breath, more powerful than intention. It doesn't require belief. It doesn't respond to effort. It doesn't care about your words. It listens to who you are. This is the source law, not something to be learned, but something to be remembered. Today, we begin a return. Chapter 1, The Forgotten Memory. You're not learning. You're remembering. In a quiet village nestled among misty hills, a boy named Ezekiel tended sheep in the early light of dawn. Each morning, his bare feet pressed against the dew-covered earth, and his thoughts wandered like clouds, aimless, silent, full of something he couldn't name. One morning, he noticed an old tree, older than any he'd seen. Its bark peeled like pages of an ancient book, drawn by something unseen. Ezekiel reached into a hollow in its trunk and pulled out a strange medallion. It pulsed gently, like it had its own breath. As he touched it, his heart didn't race. It stilled. And in that stillness, something awakened. Not a thought, not a voice, a knowing. It didn't come with answers. It came with silence. A silence so complete, it felt like the beginning of everything. The source law doesn't enter with thunder. It comes in the spaces between your thoughts, in the still breath before decision, in the feeling that rises without explanation. And when it comes, it doesn't give you something new. It brings you back to something you already are. Ezekiel had no name for it, but the sheep began to follow him more gently. The storms seemed to avoid his path. People noticed he'd become quiet, but not empty, present. The source law responds not to desire, but to identity. It doesn't hear what you say you want. It feels who you are when you're not trying. You don't need to perform for the universe. You need only return to the place before performance existed. That's why most people miss it. They're too busy asking to remember that the answer already lives in them. Reflective break, a return to silence. Close your eyes. Right now, just for a moment. Breathe, not to calm yourself, but to remember yourself. There's something beneath your thoughts, beneath your worries, beneath the story of who you think you are. It's always been there. It never left. That is the source. In the same village, years later, a woman named Clara worked with fabrics, silk, wool, linen. She rushed through orders, meeting deadlines, always doing, always striving, until one morning, she simply stopped. She didn't quit. She just allowed herself to be present. She let the needle find its rhythm. Let the thread move without rushing. Let herself feel joy in the movement of her hands. Within days, something changed. Clients began to appear without her marketing. Opportunities knocked gently, asking nothing in return. Life began to bend toward her ease, not because she earned it, but because she stopped blocking it. The source law does not require effort. It requires alignment. Alignment isn't doing more. It's becoming less divided. When your mind, your heart, your body, and your breath move as one. You don't chase life. Life comes to you. Most people think they need to fix something to be worthy. But the source doesn't ask for perfection. It only asks for presence. It doesn't respond to your effort. It responds to your essence. Practice a moment of remembering. Sit in silence. Just 2 minutes. Pause an audio. Let go of wanting. Let go of fixing. Let go of becoming. And let yourself remember. Who were you before you started trying to be someone? That's who the universe recognizes. That's who the source listens to. Not the mask, not the story, just you. In the silence, there's a doorway. Not a new destination, but a way back to something ancient, something yours. When you remember who you are, the world begins to remember you. Chapter 2, The Mirror of the World. The world reflects who you are, not what you want. Some truths do not arrive through teaching, but through recognition. They show up in the echo of your own voice, in the way life reacts to your presence, in the shape of your days. There was a man named Walter who lived on the edge of a quiet land, where the hills curved like resting bodies. He carried a flute on his back and wandered from village to village, playing songs that no one had ever taught him. Melodies would come to him in dreams, soft, haunting, impossibly familiar. For years, he believed he was simply chasing music. But one night, under a silver moon, he arrived at a valley he'd passed many times before. As he played, the air around him shifted. The breeze moved with him. The trees seemed to lean in, listening. Then, without warning, he stopped. And in the stillness that followed, a single phrase arrived, clear, uninvited, undeniable. Nothing is hidden, only unseen. He looked around and saw the valley not as landscape, but as mirror. The wind mirrored his quiet longing. The trees, his hidden grief. The silence, his waiting. The source law doesn't punish. It doesn't test. It reflects. It reflects your vibration with perfect precision, without judgment, without emotion, like water, giving back the face that leans toward it. If you carry fear, the world mirrors fear. If you walk in trust, the world opens its doors. When Walter understood this, his music changed. He no longer played to be heard. He played because he was the sound. And the world, his mirror, responded in kind. A woman named Dorothy lived in a town far from Walter's path. Her home was filled with books, shelves that touched the ceiling. She read constantly, chasing the feeling of control through knowledge. But her mind was restless. Each morning she would wake with a new set of worries. What if? What then? What now? She believed the world was unstable, unreliable, and so it was, until one day she made a small, invisible shift. She didn't fight her thoughts. She simply began to imagine peace, not as an escape, but as a possible reality. She pictured the day unfolding in softness. She greeted her fears like visitors. She allowed joy to emerge, not forced, not fabricated, just allowed. And slowly, her life changed. Problems dissolved without explanation. People responded differently. Even time seemed to move more kindly. Not because she forced it, because she stopped forcing everything else. The world is not happening to you. It is happening through you. The source law does not react. It reflects. The mind wants cause and effect. The soul moves in frequency. If your inner state is storm, life becomes cloudy. If your inner state is calm, life finds its breath again. You do not control the mirror by shouting at it. You shift the reflection by changing what stands in front of it. When you ask, why is this happening to me? The mirror shows more chaos. But when you ask, what is life trying to show me about myself? The mirror becomes a guide. Every conversation is a message. Every conflict is a question. Every joy is a reminder. The universe does not withhold. It simply returns what you are. This is why alignment is more powerful than effort. A person in alignment does not chase. They attract without asking. They receive without reaching. You've seen it. The ones who walk into a room and change its temperature. The ones who speak softly and are heard more than those who shout. The ones who do less and draw more. They do not manipulate energy. They are energy in motion. And the world, that patient mirror, bows to it. You do not need to force love. You do not need to demand respect. You do not need to earn peace. You need only become the kind of presence to which love, respect, and peace are a natural response. They cannot help but arrive. They are simply the echo of who you've become. The source law cannot be tricked. It does not respond to the mask, the persona, the performance, only to the frequency beneath it all. So when life seems closed to you, pause. Ask not, how do I fix this? But what in me is asking to be seen? Because sometimes the resistance is not punishment. It is the reflection of your own resistance to truth. Sometimes the silence of the world is the echo of your own unheard voice. And sometimes the answer has already arrived, but it's wearing the clothes of a lesson you haven't yet welcomed. Stand still. Breathe once more. See without asking. Feel without naming. Because in the mirror of the world, there are no strangers, only reflections of your forgotten self. Chapter 3, The Word Before the World. Every word shapes the field of your becoming. Long before the world was named, there was vibration. Long before language, there was resonance. Before thought, there was sound. Before intention, there was being. The source law does not begin with the mind. It begins with the voice of the soul, not the one that speaks in sentences, but the one that breathes meaning into silence. In a quiet coastal town lived a woman named Ruth. Her shop once overflowed with silks and spices, treasures from across the seas. And her tongue? Sharp, always moving. She spoke easily. Words were her currency. But over time, something strange began to happen. Her clients stopped coming. Her goods gathered dust. The gold lost its luster, not because of bad business, but because of careless sound. She gossiped. She criticized. She told stories not to build, but to stir. And words, as all things under the source law, carry weight. Every sentence she threw into the air returned, not as echo, but as structure. One evening, an old traveler stopped at her door. He bought nothing, but as he turned to leave, he said softly, "Your words are gold. Why spend them on tales that reduce?" That night, Ruth sat in silence for the first time in years. She tasted the quiet. It was not empty. It was full. The next morning, she made a vow to speak only to create, only to bless, only to embody. She spoke less, but when she did, her words landed. They carried frequency, form, force, and slowly her shop transformed, not through marketing, not through persuasion, but through vibration made visible. This is what most have forgotten. That speech is a sacred act. That every syllable is a spell. That to speak is to cast, not hope, but becoming. The source law does not distinguish between casual chatter and conscious creation. It hears only the energy beneath the word. When you complain, you carve. When you affirm with fear, you confuse. When you speak with knowing, you command. There was a man named Samuel who lived alone in the mountains. He had not spoken a word in 30 years. But every morning, he walked to a circle of ancient stones and traced unseen symbols into their surfaces. He never explained, never taught, but around his home, miracles bloomed. Crops that never needed rain, wounds that healed without medicine, a stillness that moved deeper than silence. His ritual? Speech, unspoken. Intention, unpolluted. Power, undivided. True language begins not on the lips, but in the soul. There's a difference between saying and uttering. To utter from the soul is to vibrate at the level of creation. This is why ancient teachers spoke rarely. Why the most powerful prayers are whispers. Why the earth responds more to song than to strategy. The source law listens not to the volume of your words, but to the volume of your truth. When your words come from stillness, they shape the field around you. When they come from division, they collapse before they land. To speak well is not to speak often. It is to speak from the center, to pause before the word, to feel the vibration inside it, to ask, does this build what I am becoming? If the answer is no, silence is the higher frequency, because silence too is a language. It carries the seed of what has not yet been said, but already exists. The monks of old knew this. They fasted from speech not to retreat from the world, but to refine their field, so that when the word came, it came like lightning, and the field responded like earth waiting for rain. Practice, a sacred word. Today, speak only one sentence aloud that matters. One sentence that holds the full truth of what you are ready to become. Say it not from hope. Say it not from force. Say it from stillness. And when you speak it, pause. Feel it echo, not outside of you, but through you. And then, say no more. Let your life speak the rest. Let your choices translate the sentence. Let the universe organize around the shape of your vibration. Because when you speak from the source, the world listens. Not because you ask, but because you've already become what you said. Chapter 4. Vibration is the beginning. The universe responds to tone, not tension. Before sound, there was frequency. Before form, there was rhythm. The source law is not impressed by noise. It responds to resonance. Your thoughts may reach out in desire. Your words may try to command. But it is your vibration that speaks the truth of your becoming. And the universe listens to nothing else. In a quiet mountain village where the wind curled like incense through ancient alleyways, lived a man named Clifford, a violinist, not famous, not forgotten, just a man who played every evening at the window of his small stone home. But Clifford never played melodies, only a single, pure note, held long, suspended in stillness. People thought it strange, pointless, until one evening, a woman named Margaret passed beneath his window. She had been grieving for years, carrying a sorrow that wrapped itself around her life like fog. But as Clifford's note filled the dusk, something shifted. The sound did not move through her ears. It moved through her bones. It did not say anything. It revealed something, a space she had forgotten inside herself, where stillness lived, where life still vibrated, untouched by grief. She stopped walking. She closed her eyes, and without understanding why she wept. The source law did not hear her story. It heard her state, and through Clifford's vibration, it answered. Most people believe manifestation comes from asking, from effort, from emotion. But manifestation begins long before those things. It begins in the tone you carry, not the tone of your voice, the tone of your presence. Betsy, a woman by the sea, lived a life of constant turbulence. Failed business ventures, disconnected relationships, misfortune that followed her like a shadow. She blamed others, the economy, the stars. But one morning, while watching the waves roll in perfect rhythm onto the sand, something shifted. She saw how every wave responded to an invisible pulse, a coherence that needed no explanation. And in that moment, she realized her life was chaotic because her inner rhythm was chaotic. She was moving out of sync with herself. So she stopped. Not forever, just long enough to listen. She stopped pushing. She stopped trying to get aligned. She began instead to tune. Each morning, she sat in silence and hummed softly, not to sound pretty, but to feel vibration in her chest. She let her voice align her body. She let her breath align her rhythm. She let the simplicity of sound bring her back to harmony. And as her frequency changed, so did her life. Not overnight, but undeniably. People began staying. Projects began working. The wind around her shifted, not because she spoke louder, but because she vibrated clearer. The source law cannot be manipulated. You cannot fake tone. You cannot trick the field with affirmations layered over doubt or smiles built on anxiety. The universe doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you are vibrating, even when you're silent. When you walk into a room with joy, the air makes room for you. When you carry confusion, the world reflects it. This is why silence matters. Why stillness matters. Because in silence, You can feel the tone beneath the noise. You can tune it, refine it, not with judgment, but with attention. You do not manifest through control. You manifest through resonance. And resonance is not something you create. It's something you allow. When you return to coherence with your own being, the body knows the truth of this. It is an instrument. It vibrates whether you realize it or not. Every thought hums. Every emotion sends ripples. Your task is not to be perfect, but to be tuned. Like a violin before the concert. Like a voice before the song. You're not broken. You're just waiting to be brought into alignment. And when that happens, when every part of you is singing the same note, even in silence, the field responds. The source law answers, not because you asked, but because you finally became the tone it could recognize. Practice morning tuning. Sit in stillness. Place your hands on your chest. Close your eyes. Breathe. Now hum. Gently. Low. Steady. Feel the vibration inside you. You don't need to chant a mantra. You don't need the right words. Let the sound find its way into your bones. Let it tune the instrument of your being. Let it vibrate all the way to the edges of your field. And when you're done, listen. Not for words. Not for signs. Listen for the feeling of harmony. That is your real language. That is your true request. And the universe, the source, has already heard it. Chapter 5, Desire is Divine. What calls you from within is not ego. It's destiny remembering itself. Desire has been misunderstood. We were taught that to want is weakness. That longing is a sign of lack. That to desire is to step out of balance. But what if the opposite is true? What if your deepest desire is not a problem to be solved, but a map back to your truest self? Desire is not noise. It is signal. It is the voice of the source law moving through your being, calling you toward a future that already exists, one your soul remembers, even when your mind forgets. In a distant village shrouded in morning mist, a girl named Frances dreamed each night of a golden door. It was always the same, an ancient arch glowing with light. Silent, still, waiting. She'd wake with her heart racing, breath full of something both thrilling and terrifying. But she told no one. She believed the dream was fantasy, an illusion born from loneliness. After all, she was just a girl, an orphan with no name to carry and no one to believe in her. One day, she gathered her courage and traveled to the mountains to visit a sage known only by whispers. She described the dream, her voice trembling. The sage smiled gently and said, "That door is not imagined. It is your becoming, asking for passage." Frances asked, "But why do I see it every night if I can't open it?" The sage answered, "You can, but only when you stop questioning whether you deserve to." The source law doesn't place desire in you to torment you. It places it as invitation. Desire is divine instruction, a vibration that pulls you toward alignment. It's not your ego speaking. It's the universe remembering itself through you. What if the dream is not something you created, but something that created you? Frances did not open the golden door that day, but from that moment, she stopped calling it a dream. She started calling it a promise. And slowly, her life began to reorganize. She walked with more certainty. She listened to her longings. She stopped apologizing for the things she couldn't explain. And the golden door? It began to appear in waking life, in people, in places, in moments that felt like déjà vu. Desire had not led her astray. It had led her home. There was a man named Joe, a gifted healer who denied his own touch. He worked ordinary jobs, lived a quiet life, ignored the strange ability he had, the way people felt better around him, the way their wounds closed faster in his presence. He told himself, "That kind of power isn't mine. It's too big, too strange." And so the gift faded, until his own health began to decline. The same energy he'd refused to give outward began turning inward, withering his spirit. One night, with no strength left, he placed his hands over his chest and whispered, "I remember now." That was all it took. The energy returned, not as a miracle, but as reunion. Joe's desire had never been wrong. He had only delayed it, feared it, tried to outthink it. But desire is not logic. It is direction. The source law does not operate through shame. It moves through your permission. Your greatest longing is not a distraction from your path. It is the path. The things you want, when stripped of ego, are not indulgences. They are remembrances of who you were, of who you are, of who you are still becoming. You are not designed to want safety and settle for silence. You were made to remember your wholeness through the ache of your calling, to hear your name spoken in the echo of what pulls you forward. You do not need to convince the universe to give you what you desire. You only need to align with the version of you that already receives it. Practice sacred declaration of desire. Right now, think of one thing you deeply want, not the superficial version, the one that scares you a little, the one you've buried, the one you feel both thrilled and afraid to say aloud. Write it down, slowly, honestly. Let your hand shake if it must. Then speak it, not as a wish, but as a truth. This is mine to become. Now fold the paper, burn it, bury it, hide it in your favorite book. Release it, not to forget it, but to trust it. You have named the longing. You have aligned with its vibration. The source law is listening, not to your volume, but to your certainty. From this moment forward, you walk not as someone who wants, but as someone who has already said yes. Chapter 6. Doubt is the gatekeeper. Doubt is not your enemy. It is the final guardian before power. There is a space between who you are and who you are becoming. It is not a void. It is a threshold, and every threshold has its guardian. Its name is doubt. Most see doubt as a signal to stop, a flaw in their faith, a crack in their confidence. But the source law teaches differently. Doubt does not arise to destroy your becoming. It rises to test your readiness, not to see if you can win, but to see if you are willing to surrender the masks, the stories, and the small self you've outgrown. In the hills beyond the city, a man named Morris stood guard each night over an ancient temple. He was loyal, disciplined, unshakable. Yet lately, strange lights had begun to appear along the horizon. Whispers in the wind, dreams of golden pathways that haunted his sleep. Each morning, he'd awaken more confused than before. He told himself they were illusions, tricks of the mind, distractions. He clung tighter to his routines, to the known, to the familiar armor of his duties. But the dreams did not stop. Then, one moonless night, he collapsed at his post, his body no longer willing to carry what his soul had already released. And in that deep silence, a voice came, not from outside, but from within. Doubt is permission to pause, not to quit. In that moment, he saw clearly. Doubt was not blocking the path. It was the path. It had never been an enemy. It had been a guardian, asking, not are you worthy, but are you ready? Ready to let go of who he thought he had to be. Ready to receive who he already was becoming. You may believe that doubt means you failed, but in truth, doubt means you're standing at the door. And every gate worth passing through is protected by a final riddle. Will you be honest? Not with the world, but with yourself. There was a woman named Edna who had healing in her hands. When she touched others, pain softened, energy shifted, eyes brightened, but she hid her gift. What if they don't believe me? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm not enough? So she silenced herself, and the doubt grew louder, not as punishment, but as echo. The source law doesn't respond to who you pretend to be. It responds to the truth vibrating beneath the fear. So the signs came stronger. Birds landed at her window. Strangers came asking for help she hadn't offered. Her dreams filled with ancient temples and glowing hands. Until one morning, she stopped fighting. She sat in the garden, lifted her hands to the sun, and said softly, "I am ready now, not because I feel certain, but because I can no longer deny the truth." That was the moment everything shifted. You see, doubt had not come to tell her she was wrong. It had come to protect the threshold, to ensure that only truth could pass. The source law is not moved by performance. It is activated by authenticity. And doubt is the flame that burns away the false before you are allowed to hold the real. If you are feeling doubt now, do not flee from it. Sit with it. Speak to it. Ask it, what truth are you guarding? Because beneath doubt is not more confusion. It is a deeper knowing waiting for permission to rise. Like fire turning or into gold, doubt refines. It strips. It tests. It asks for your whole yes. Not the yes of hope, but the yes of presence. You don't cross the gate by proving anything. You cross by finally speaking the truth you've been too afraid to admit. You cross when you stop trying to become powerful and realize you already are. Practice the sacred dialogue. Write down one doubt you are carrying. Be honest. Let it be messy. Now sit with it. Breathe slowly. Place the doubt before you, not as obstacle, but as companion. Ask, what deeper truth are you protecting? Listen. Do not rush the answer. Some truths come gently, like dew. Others crash through you like waves. But all of them, once seen, become light. And once you have seen them, you are never the same. This is how the source law works. Not by making you more, but by stripping away everything that was never yours to carry. You're not learning. You're not fixing. You are remembering. And sometimes, doubt is simply the last veil that must be lifted before you can finally say, "This is mine. This is me. I am ready." Chapter 7, Action in Alignment. Do not move to prove, move to express. There is action born of pressure. There is action born of fear. And then there is action born of alignment, sacred movement that flows not from need, but from inner knowing. The source law responds not to the volume of your effort, but to the quality of your vibration as you move. When your steps are forced, the universe resists. When your steps arise from stillness, creation bends to meet you. Lucian was a craftsman who rose before dawn each day, before the sun touched the sky, before the village stirred. Not to work, not to plan, to move. Alone in his shop, he would close his eyes and allow his body to sway, slowly, with no rhythm but the one that called from within. No music, no goal, just motion guided by something ancient. To an outsider, he may have seemed mad. To the source, he was in communion. And something happened after these dawn movements. When Lucian laid his hands on wood, the grain itself would soften. The material responded differently, yielding to his touch, not because of superior technique, but because of vibrational coherence. He didn't just carve, he listened. He let the material speak, and his touch replied. What emerged from his hands could not be explained. His chairs glowed with warmth. His tables hummed subtly in the presence of quiet hearts. People traveled days just to sit in the presence of what he made. But Lucian didn't advertise. He didn't hustle. He aligned, and then he moved, and the world made room. Annabelle, across the sea, spent years doing what so many of us do. She chased every method, every blueprint, every formula for success. She attended every seminar, devoured every strategy. She did everything right, and still life resisted. Her efforts left her exhausted, disillusioned, hollow, until one day she did something radical. She stopped, not because she gave up, but because her soul whispered a new instruction. Sit down and listen. And so she did. She sat at her garden with no intention. No next move. No goal. She just sat until the impulse arose. Walked toward the ocean. It made no sense, but she followed. On that shoreline, she met a stranger. A stranger who would later become her business partner, her creative mirror, her co-dreamer. She had not planned the meeting. She had simply answered the alignment. The source law does not reward planning. It responds to presence. Action and alignment does not begin in the mind. It begins in the body, in the breath, in the quiet knowing that rises like a tide before thought catches up. When you move from that place, when your motion is a continuation of your vibration, the path unfolds. Doors open, resources align, time bends, because you're no longer moving against life. You're moving with it. Most people believe alignment means stillness, but the truth is subtler. Stillness precedes sacred movement, like a dancer who hears the first note before her feet shift, like a tree that waits until spring to bloom, not from fear, but from perfect timing. The source law waits too. It does not force. It flows. When your doing becomes a natural expression of your being, everything changes. Practice, the body knows. Sit in a quiet space. Place your hand on your belly. Breathe. Now ask gently, where do you want to move today? Don't rush. Don't think. Wait. A small urge may arise, to stretch, to walk, to face the sun, to dance. Follow it, not for results, but for realignment. Let your body lead. Let your breath follow. Let your mind observe. You are not separate from the field. You are an extension of it. When your movement becomes aligned with your inner truth, your life becomes art, sacred, embodied, and free. The world will tell you that you must act constantly to matter. But the source law reminds you, only aligned action holds power. And aligned action is not reaction. It is revelation. It is your soul stepping forward and saying, now, Chapter 8, The Guardian of the Gate. You don't pass by pushing, you pass by becoming. Every threshold has a test. Every becoming has a final question. And the greater the transformation, the quieter and more personal the challenge becomes. This is not a test from a universe. The source does not withhold. But to move into your next version, your vibration must match the space beyond the gate. The guardian you meet is not a creature, not an obstacle. It is you, the version of you that cannot pass through the door you're trying to open. Florence knew this well. She had walked a path of discipline for years, meditated daily, spoke gently, studied every teaching she could find. And still, the gate remained shut. Not a physical one, but an energetic threshold. A sense that something wanted to open but couldn't. A becoming that waited on the other side. One night, in her sleep, she dreamed of an ancient gate, carved in stone, breathing with light. A figure appeared beside it, robed in shadows and stars. His eyes held galaxies. His presence, both love and truth. I am Silas, he said, keeper of the threshold. Florence stood tall, certain of her wisdom. Silas asked her, what seeks you more than you seek it? She answered with clever words, phrases she'd memorized, teachings she'd repeated. The gate did not move. He asked again. She gave another polished answer. Still silence. Finally, she stopped. Tears welled in her eyes. Her shoulders dropped. She placed her hand on her chest and whispered, my own becoming. The gate shimmered and opened. The source law does not respond to cleverness. It responds to sincerity. The guardian is not here to block you. It is here to ask one question. Will you drop the mask now? Not for others. For yourself. You can perform your way to applause. You cannot perform your way to alignment. Peter knew this too well. He stood on stage after stage, preaching confidence, success, empowerment. He wore sharp suits. He said the right words. But inside, silence. Resistance. disconnection. He thought the universe wasn't listening. But the source was listening all along, not to his voice, but to his frequency. And what it heard was fear. Fear of being seen without the armor. Fear of being real. So his world stalled. Until one night, he stood alone in an empty auditorium, lights off, microphone off, and said the words he'd never said aloud. I don't know if I'm enough. And then stillness. And then warmth. And then truth. Peter's power didn't return because he said the right thing. It returned because he finally said the real thing. The source law responds to what is, not what you think it should be. And truth, no matter how raw, is always powerful. You're not being tested. You're being invited to stop carrying what cannot cross with you, to speak what has remained hidden, to surrender the illusion so the real can rise. The guardian at the gate will not ask for credentials. It will not ask for titles. It will not ask how many books you've read or meditations you've completed. It will ask, are you willing to stand here, naked, honest, whole, and say who you really are? If your answer is yes, the gate will open. If your answer is silence, the gate will wait. Because the source law is never in a rush. It does not deny you. It simply waits for you to align. Practice threshold truth. Think of one area in your life that feels stuck. Name the gate. Visualize it. Now ask, what truth have I been afraid to admit here? Write it. Speak it. Feel it. Even if it trembles. Even if it breaks. Because truth always opens. The version of you who carries the weight of pretending cannot pass through. But the version of you who speaks the truth, even with tears, walks through effortlessly. The gate does not open to force. It opens to you, fully revealed. And the moment you say, this is who I am, and I'm not hiding anymore, the guardian will bow, and the gate will vanish. Chapter 9, The Invisible Crown. True power does not declare itself. It simply arrives. When you walk in alignment with the source law, something subtle begins to happen. People notice, but they can't explain why. Spaces open without being asked. Silence deepens, not into awkwardness, but reverence. You don't need to perform. You don't need a posture. You don't even need to speak. Your very presence begins to resonate. This is what the ancients called grace, what mystics called aura, what the source law reveals as the frequency of embodiment. In a quiet town where leaves whispered with the wind and the days stretched soft and golden, there lived a man named Lyle. He worked in the gardens by the city square, tending flowers, sweeping pathways, trimming ivy that curled over stone walls. He had no title, no grand audience. He did not teach, preach, or proclaim. And yet, strangers passing by would pause and look at him as if they'd seen something holy. Some bowed their heads slightly without knowing why. Children stopped crying in his presence. Arguments softened when he walked through a crowd. Lyle didn't notice. He was too busy whispering to the rose bushes, humming to the wind, listening to the still rhythm of the earth beneath his feet. But one night he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in the center of a circle of light. From above, a stream of radiance descended and formed a ring, not of metal or stone, but of frequency around his head. When he woke, he didn't speak of it, but he understood. He had become a vessel. He had aligned with something so fully, so quietly, that his being had become his message. This is the secret no one tells you about power. Real power is silent. Real authority doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't come from influence or visibility. It comes from frequency, from coherence, from resonance. The source law does not bless the loudest voice. It flows through the clearest channel. There was a woman named Evelyn. For years, she had filled rooms with her words, spiritual insights, sacred knowledge, well-articulated philosophies. She meant well. But beneath the words lived a hunger, the kind that seeks validation instead of expression. People listened, but they didn't return. Until she stopped. Not from bitterness, but from awakening. She realized the words she shared were not yet rooted in her being. They lived in her mind, not in her frequency. So she stopped trying to teach. She started to embody. She walked in nature. She sat in stillness. She let silence become her language. And then something changed. People began seeking her again, not for what she said, but for how they felt in her presence. They called it peace. They called it clarity. Some couldn't name it at all, but they came because Evelyn had become a lighthouse, not one that flashed, but one that glowed. The source law reveals this principle over and over. Authentic spiritual power attracts, it never pursues. When you are aligned, you do not need to assert your worth. You do not need to prove your depth. You simply are, and the world reflects it. This is the invisible crown, not a thing to wear, but a thing that appears naturally when you stop seeking permission to be who you already are. It rests upon those who have remembered, those who move in stillness, those who radiate without reaching, those who lead without controlling. And what's most beautiful, they don't need to be recognized, but they always are, not by the masses, but by the moments, by the way animals draw near, by the way chaos calms when they enter the room, by the way others breathe deeper in their presence. Practice walk of presence. Today, walk in silence for 10 minutes. Not to go somewhere, not to clear your mind. Walk as one who remembers their crown. Your spine, straight but soft. Your eyes, steady but kind. Your breath, deep and unforced. Notice how the world responds. How doors open. How glances soften. How life organizes itself around your certainty. You don't have to do anything. You simply have to become so whole within yourself that the external must realign around you. This is not pride. It is clarity. It is embodiment. When you stand in truth, the universe bows, not because you asked it to, but because truth is the frequency it recognizes as its own. Chapter 10, Reality Bows to You. When you stop performing, the world stops resisting. There is a moment in every journey when striving fades. Not because you gave up, but because something deeper awoke inside you. A recognition that reality is not something to chase, shape, or dominate. Reality is not outside of you. It is the mirror of your embodiment. When you become, fully and unapologetically, what you truly are, reality has no choice but to bow. In the heart of a vibrant city, among the clamor of bartering voices and the scent of sun-warmed spices, a man named Horace danced. Each day, he stepped on a cobblestone streets with polished shoes and practiced precision. He twirled. He smiled. He counted coins tossed into his hat. He watched for applause. But the more he performed, the emptier he felt. The more he tried to impress, the less connected he became to the rhythm that once called him. Until one morning, something changed. There was no audience. The plaza was still. His hat sat empty. And in that stillness, something cracked open. He took a breath, closed his eyes, let his arms move, not to entertain, but to feel. And in that moment, he wasn't dancing for anyone. He became the dance. No effort, no show, no split between performer and movement. And then the wind shifted. A child sat cross-legged to watch. A vendor leaned forward with quiet reverence. Coins began to appear, but Horace didn't notice. He was gone, dissolved into the joy that had first taught him how to move. This is the secret. Creation flows not from effort, but from embodiment. The source law doesn't respond to the parts you pretend to be. It doesn't listen to the noise you make to prove your value. It listens to the depth of your coherence. When every part of you, mind, body, breath, emotion, sings the same silent song. Reality shifts. It doesn't require convincing. It doesn't require strategy. It simply responds to the clarity of your frequency. June, a woman who had spent most of her life chasing love, knew this truth well. She searched in all the places society told her to look, in roles, in compromise, in endlessly proving her worth. Each attempt, like sand slipping through her fingers, until one ordinary morning, she sat in her garden. No grand insight, no dramatic revelation, just a quiet knowing. I am enough as I am, entire, complete. She didn't say it aloud. She simply remembered it, with her cells, with her bones, with her breath. And in the days that followed, suitors began to appear, but not like before. They came gently, with presence, with respect, not because she had changed how she looked, but because she had changed how she vibrated. She had stopped seeking love, and instead had become a frequency to which love naturally returns. The Source Law teaches this again and again. You don't attract what you chase. You attract what you become. When your energy says, I need this, reality reflects the need. When your energy says, this is who I am, reality reflects the certainty. Your frequency is a magnet. It does not lie. It cannot be forced. It cannot be mimicked. The world does not respond to what you wish was true. It responds to what you have claimed through embodiment. Practice the bow of reality. Sit in stillness. Breathe deeply. Now visualize one part of your life, a relationship, a career, a dream, bowing before you. Not as submission, but as recognition. See it leaning toward your vibration, not because you demanded it, but because you finally became the version of yourself to whom it belongs. Now feel the shift within you. Not hope, not longing, just knowing that this life is already yours because it matches you. Let that truth sink into your body. Breathe it in, because from this moment forward, your task is not to fight for your becoming, but to remember that the moment you become it internally, the external must follow. Not in time, in truth. And truth is not delayed. It simply waits for alignment. And when that alignment is clear, reality bows. Not in theory, in fact, in form, in full. Chapter 11, do not cast pearls. Sacred truths lose their power when spoken into unready ears. There are truths that are meant to be whispered. There are knowings so sacred, so luminous, that when they are shared too soon, too freely, or without the soil of readiness, they scatter like ash in the wind. The Source Law is generous, but not careless. It reveals in cycles, conceals with purpose, protects the power of what is not yet ripe. In a village held in the curve of a misty valley, a woman named Gertrude awoke each morning from dreams woven in light. Symbols danced behind her eyelids, names she had never heard whispered from the stars. Visions, clear, vivid, undeniably sacred, poured through her like rivers made of song. She wrote them down with care, meditated on their meaning, carried them like pearls in her heart. And yet, she couldn't help herself. She shared them, at the bakery, at the market, with friends over tea, not from ego, but from innocent eagerness, from a hunger to give, to help. But something began to shift. The more she spoke, the more blank the faces became. People smiled politely. Some laughed. Others questioned her sanity. And slowly, the dreams faded. The visions dulled. The symbols stopped coming. The thread between her and the unseen began to fray. One evening, as the last light bent across the hills, a figure appeared at her door. A sage cloaked in simplicity. His eyes ancient, quiet, full. He said only this: the sacred must be spoken only in sacred spaces. For what flows from Source is meant first to feed the one who receives it. Then he turned and vanished into the dusk. Gertrude wept, not out of shame, but out of recognition. The truth had not left her. It had retreated, waiting for her to become a vessel that honored it with silence. The source law teaches that wisdom is not currency. It is not meant to be traded for approval or scattered for applause. It is seeding, and seeds must rest in the dark before they bloom in the light. Benedict, a revered elder in a far-off town, had once carried great influence. His insights were sought by leaders and seekers alike. But as his following grew, so did his habit of oversharing. He spoke at every gathering, explained every metaphor, broke every silence, and with each explanation, the depth of his words diminished. Until one day, he sat across from a young woman who had never spoken in public. She said nothing for 20 minutes, just watched, breathed, and when she finally spoke a single sentence, clear, unadorned, the entire room shifted. Benedict realized something he had forgotten. The fewer the words, the more power they carry when they come from a place of fullness. The source law operates through containment before release. Wisdom, like wine, must mature in stillness before it is poured. When you receive a sacred insight, a truth so clear it makes your heart beat differently, it is not always for the world. It is first for you, to heal you, to expand you, to initiate you. When you give it away too quickly, you give it away before it becomes part of you. And if it's not fully yours, it cannot fully serve anyone else. There is a reason ancient teachers spoke in riddles. There is a reason sacred texts veil their meaning. Not to confuse, but to protect. Not all ears are ready. Not all ground is fertile. And when you cast pearls before those not yet ready to recognize them, you risk diminishing their sacredness within yourself. Practice sacred containment. Think of a truth you've recently discovered, something that arrived in silence, a realization, a dream, a sentence that cracked something open. Write it down with reverence, not to share, to keep. Place it inside a journal, a book you love, a box of memories. Let sit there. Let work inside you. Return to it, not as a public message, but as a private altar. Let root. Let rise. And if it asks to be shared, you will know, and you will speak it not for reaction, but for reverberation. Because truth, when shared from embodiment, carries a frequency that awakens others, even without explanation. And if it is never shared, it has still done its work. Not all pearls are meant to be seen. Some are meant to shine only in the quiet temple of your own becoming. Chapter 12. Symbols and Signs. The universe does not speak in paragraphs. It speaks in poetry. The source does not always arrive as voice or vision. It moves through the ordinary, cloaked in the texture of your day, speaking in a language that only your heart knows how to read. It does not shout. It whispers through shadows, through birdsong, through patterns so subtle they are missed by the eyes that only look outward. But for those who know how to see, everything is a message. In a quiet cottage on the edge of the forest, a seamstress named Beatrice lived alone with her thoughts. Her days were filled with thread and fabric, the sound of scissors slicing rhythmically through silk, the scent of lavender from her window garden. But lately, a question had crept in her chest. Am I on the right path? Doubt circled her like mist. She prayed. She waited. But no answers came, only silence. Until one night, as she stitched beside the window, a black crow landed on the sill. Its eyes obsidian, still, knowing. They met hers, just for a breath. Then it flew away. Within hours, a stranger knocked on her door with an unusual commission. A single garment for a ceremony of great importance. A turning point in her career. A door, long closed, swinging open. It was then she understood. The crow was not random. It was a response. The source law speaks in signs, not because it is cryptic, but because it is intimate. It doesn't want you to analyze. It wants you to awaken. Wallace, a merchant by the sea, had always dismissed dreams. They were, to him, nonsense, strange collisions of memory and imagination. But one dream returned, night after night, his shop empty, shelves bare, waves crashing in the distance. He ignored it until it refused to be ignored. The next day, he sold all his inventory on instinct. 2 days later, a storm flooded the harbor. The goods would have been ruined. The source had spoken, not in logic, in symbol, and Wallace finally had listened. These symbols are not always dramatic. They can arrive in a phrase heard twice in one day, a number that repeats, a feather on your doorstep, an animal crossing your path. Each carries frequency. Each is a vibrational mirror, responding not to your mind, but to your energy. The mind asks, is this a coincidence? The soul answers, this is a conversation. The source law has never stopped speaking. We've simply forgotten how to hear. To receive these signs, you must return to stillness. You must resist the urge to decode everything immediately. Sometimes the meaning is not for the mind to know, but for the heart to absorb. The message is not in the explanation. The message is in the resonance. It shifts your frequency, and that is enough. Practice listening to the symbols. Today, ask gently, show me a sign. Say it without force, without demand, simply as a whisper from child to parent, from soul to source. Then let go. Do not search. Do not anticipate. Simply stay open. It may arrive in the rustling of leaves, in a stranger's sentence, in the way the wind touches your neck at just the right moment. When it comes, you'll feel it, not in your head, but in the way your breath catches just slightly. That is the universe speaking. You don't need to understand it all. You only need to say, I see you. I'm listening. And the signs will continue, more and more, not because you chase them, but because you finally tuned in. You are not separate from the language of the cosmos. You are its alphabet, its syllables, its ink on the page of now. You don't need to speak it fluently. You just need to remember that every moment is a sentence written for you. And when you learn to listen with your whole being, you will find that you're not lost in the story. You're the story the source is telling. Chapter 13, Radiance Without Effort. You do not have to try to shine. You simply have to stop covering the light. There's a kind of beauty that does not ask to be seen. It does not demand. It does not chase. It does not hustle to be heard or struggle to be chosen. It simply is, and in being, it transforms everything around it. This is the frequency of effortless radiance, and it only appears when you stop trying to become and start allowing yourself to be. In a dimly lit concert hall long after the applause had faded, Martha sat alone at the piano. Her fingers trembled slightly with age. Her wrists ached. For 50 years, she had filled grand rooms. Audiences rose to their feet. She had played every great hall in the world, but something inside her had gone quiet. The notes still came, but they felt rehearsed, polished, empty. She no longer felt the music. She didn't come that night to perform. No one knew she was there. She came because something within her longed for one final moment of truth. She closed her eyes, breathed, let her hands rest on the keys, not with control, but with memory, with trust. And then, softly, without expectation, she played. Not to impress, not to remember who she had been, but to return to the place before applause ever mattered. And something happened. The notes shimmered. They filled the hall like smoke, not loud, but thick with something real. Something raw, something alive. People from neighboring rooms wandered in, drawn by a sound they couldn't describe. Some stood in silence. Others sat. A few wept. not because of the music itself, but because of what it awakened inside them. Martha wasn't performing. She had become a channel, a vessel through which the source moved, pure and unfiltered. Her radiance didn't come from skill. It came from surrender. The source law responds not to talent, but to truth. It does not amplify performance. It amplifies presence. When you stop trying to make something happen, the truth of who you are rises, uninterrupted. Irving, a shopkeeper in a quiet seaside village, spent years trying to draw people into his store. He hired consultants, redesigned his window, invested in clever marketing campaigns. Nothing worked. Each morning, he opened his shop with dread. Each evening, he counted coins that didn't come. Until one day, exhausted, he gave up, not on the shop, but on the struggle. He stopped performing. He began to rearrange the shelves, not for customers, but for himself. He put items where they felt good, lit candles that made him happy, played music he liked, hummed as he moved. He smiled only when he meant it, and people noticed, not because he called them in, but because something called them in through him. They walked by and stopped. They didn't know why. They just felt better inside. Irving had tapped into a law more powerful than any strategy. True magnetism flows from alignment, not effort. When you radiate, the world adjusts. When you are coherent within, the field around you becomes ordered. This is the difference between attraction and manipulation. Manipulation says, "Look at me." Radiance says, "I'm here." And the universe answers, "I see you." You don't have to try to shine. You only need to stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. Stop shaping your truth to match expectations. Stop using effort to disguise your fear. Because when you finally return to your essence, the energy of joy, ease, integrity, truth, the world doesn't just see you, it feels you. You become a beacon, not because you try, but because you finally allow. Practice. Do one thing for no reason. Today, choose one small thing that brings you joy. A song, a walk, a taste, a color. Do it only because it delights you. Don't post it. Don't share it. Don't explain it. Let it be sacred, yours. As you do it, notice how your energy shifts. Feel the frequency of unfiltered pleasure, not the kind that burns fast, but the kind that rises from the root and settles in the chest. That's the frequency of your true self. And when you live from that place, the source law flows through you. Opportunities knock. Right people show up. The path opens, not because you forced it, but because you stopped standing in the way of your own light. You're not here to chase light. You're the light the world is looking for. And your greatest power comes not from seeking, but from allowing yourself to be exactly what you are and letting that be enough. Chapter 14. Speak, and it is so. The universe does not respond to repetition. It responds to resonance. There comes a moment when silence has done its work, when the seed has rested long enough in the dark, when the truth has matured inside the soul, when the being has become ready, not to ask, but to declare. And that declaration does not need to be loud. It does not need to be repeated. It does not need to be validated. It only needs to be true. In a hidden forest where moss grew over ancient stones and the air smelled of memory, a woman named Matilda wandered. Her grief had taken her voice. Not literally, but energetically. Words no longer came easily. For months, she moved through her days in silence, not resisting it, not hating it, just living inside it like one lives inside a shadow that won't quite pass. Until one day, the forest led her to a cave, quiet, hollow, untouched. It wasn't just a place. It was a threshold. She stepped in, sat down, listened, and from the depths of her being, without force or intention, one word rose. Life. She whispered it. The sound echoed, not just across the stone walls, but through something deeper. Birds stirred. A fox lifted its head in the distance. The trees outside rustled, though there was no wind. She had spoken from the core of her being, not to ask, not to plead, but to affirm existence itself. This is the power of declaration. Not when it is said often, but when it is said from perfect alignment. The source law does not require you to beg. It does not respond to volume. It does not care for repetition. It answers to resonance. When you speak from that place, when every cell in your body vibrates in agreement with the words you say, reality must respond. Because at that point, the vibration is no longer a request. It is a command issued not from ego, but from the soul's memory of its divine authority. Eugene had spent his life scoffing at concepts like manifestation and frequency. A skeptic, a man of numbers and logic. But after a series of losses, business, marriage, health, he found himself alone in the early morning hours, whispering truths into the dark. Not wishes, not affirmations, just sentences that felt like him. I am rebuilding. I am strong in stillness. I am the rhythm returning. He didn't shout them. He barely spoke above a whisper. But each day, he lived as if those words were already real. And one by one, they became. Because he wasn't trying to convince the universe. He was simply letting it hear the echo of what he already knew. The source law meets you in that place, where your speech is no longer a performance. It's a mirror, where what you say isn't a request. It's a reflection. You do not need to cast the same spell 1,000 times. You only need to speak once, fully, with clarity, with reverence, with coherence, and then live as if the words have already taken root. Because they have. Every word is a seed, but only the ones spoken from wholeness carry the code to bloom. Empty words scatter. Truth-filled words grow immediately. Practice the one-sentence ritual. Find a quiet place. Let your body soften. Let your breath slow. And when the moment feels still enough, speak one sentence aloud. One. A sentence that names your becoming. That claims your truth. That vibrates with your entire being. Let it emerge from silence. Not from thought. From knowing. Say it once. Only once. Then stop and trust that the field heard you. Your role now is not to repeat, it is to embody. Walk into your day as if the universe has already rearranged itself around your words. Because it has. You don't need to speak more. You need to speak truer. And the truth, once spoken from wholeness, is never forgotten by the universe. It moves like light. It bends reality around it. It is done. Chapter 15, The Circle of Creation. You are not a visitor in the universe. You are a part of its pulse. Creation is not linear. It does not follow a straight path from desire to result. It moves in circles, in spirals, in ever-returning waves that expand outward, only to return inward, deeper, wiser, more aligned. The source law does not operate in steps. It flows through cycles of becoming. Thought becomes vibration. Vibration becomes form. Form becomes belief. Belief becomes thought again, and the wheel turns. You're not separate from that wheel. You're not watching it spin. You are the wheel. Nora, a quiet artist, discovered this without ever naming it. She worked with glass, blowing molten material into delicate forms, some transparent, some dense with color. It was her therapy, her prayer, her dance with the unseen. But one day, while shaping a vessel, she paused mid-breath. Something had shifted. She realized the glass wasn't responding to her hands. It was responding to her intention. When she was tense, the form would collapse. When she was centered, it rose smoothly. She hadn't noticed before, but now it was obvious. Her internal state was shaping the external reality in real time. She thought of her relationships, her body, her finances. They too moved according to this rhythm. The way she believed influenced how she breathed. How she breathed shaped how she moved. How she moved altered what she touched. And so the cycle spun, not just outside her, but through her. The source law teaches this truth quietly, but insistently. Your life is not a series of disconnected events. It is a mirror of the energy you are cycling, over and over again. If your thoughts come from fear, they create vibrations of resistance, which take shape in tense conversations, tight timing, missed chances. Those forms then reinforce the fear. See, I knew it wouldn't work, and so the wheel spins. But when your thoughts rise from knowing, from softness, from a memory that the source lives within you, then the forms that appear, even small ones, feel like echoes of peace. And the cycle affirms itself. Yes, this is who I am. There was a man named Wendell who always felt behind. No matter how much he achieved, it wasn't enough. No matter how far he came, there was more to prove. Until one evening, exhausted, he watched the moon rise. And he saw it clearly. The moon never hurries. It doesn't rush its light. It doesn't ask the sky if it's good enough. It simply moves in its cycle. Full, then empty, then full again. Wendell cried, not from sadness, but from release. He stopped pushing, and for the first time in his life, he began to participate in creation, not struggle against it. He began to choose thoughts that felt like truth, not just strategy. He honored his emotions instead of fearing them. He treated his actions like offerings, not obligations. And everything changed because he was no longer trying to control the wheel. He was dancing with it. The source law doesn't care if you're perfect. It cares if you're present. It cares whether your thoughts, feelings, and actions belong to the same frequency. That's alignment. And alignment makes the circle sing. Practice mapping the circle. Take a moment today to trace a cycle in your life. Pick one area: work, love, money, health. Ask yourself, what do I usually think about this? How do those thoughts make me feel? What actions do I take when I feel that way? What results tend to come from those actions? And what beliefs do those results reinforce? You will see it, the wheel you've been riding. If the cycle is beautiful, honor it. If the cycle is painful, don't judge it. Just interrupt it with one aligned thought, one aligned breath, one small act that says, I remember who I am now. That's all it takes to begin a new orbit. The source law is not punishing you. It is reflecting the energy you're putting into the circle. When your vibration rises, the wheel turns differently. And what comes around is no longer repetition. It's evolution. It's the spiral returning. Not to the same place, but to the same place transformed. This is how you create. Not by force, by becoming a conscious participant in your own becoming. Chapter 16, The Guardian of the Threshold. You will not be asked to prove yourself, only to reveal yourself. There is a moment at the edge of every transformation, a stillness before the next becoming, a breath held between what was and what will be. This is not a pause. It is a meeting, a sacred confrontation, a threshold that does not open for effort, only for truth. You will not find this gate in the world. You will find it within, and standing before it is you. Not the version that smiles for approval. Not the version who repeats teachings but hasn't yet lived them. The version that has nothing left to protect. This is the guardian of the threshold. Not an enemy, not a test, but a mirror. And it asks only one thing. Are you ready to release who you were to become who you are? Horus stood before this threshold, not as the performer who once danced for coins and praise, but as the man who had become the dance. He no longer needed the gate to open. He simply stood in full presence, breath aligned, heart unguarded, soul unveiled. And that was enough, because the threshold does not open through force. It opens when you become so true, so coherent, so undivided, that nothing can hold you back, not even your past self. The guardian steps aside for those who no longer pretend, because the guardian is your former identity, standing tall, asking, will you carry me through again, or will you leave me here in peace? There is grief in that letting go, a quiet mourning for the masks, a goodbye to the roles that once kept you safe, a reverent bow to the stories you no longer need. But there is also freedom, because when you drop everything false, what remains is not weakness. It is light, unfiltered, unapologetic, unstoppable. This is the final moment where you don't break through. You don't rush. You become, and the gate opens inward, because it was never locked, only waiting. Practice crossing the threshold. Sit alone in a room where you can be fully honest. Close your eyes. Ask gently, what part of me am I still carrying that no longer belongs? Wait. Don't judge what comes. Don't rationalize. Let the truth rise. It might be a role, a habit, a fear, a voice, a memory. Place your hand on your heart. Say, I see you. I honor you. And I no longer need to carry you forward. Now, imagine standing at a threshold. Your past self behind you. Your next self ahead. And in the center, stillness. Step forward, not with force, but with clarity. And as you do, whisper, it is done. I am through. Feel the shift in your body, not as excitement, but as peace. That's how you know the gate has opened, because peace is the vibration of truth fully lived. You're no longer becoming. You have become. The journey continues, yes, but no longer from lack, from wholeness, no longer seeking, now walking in remembrance. The Source Law does not celebrate breakthroughs. It celebrates revelation, the moment when you no longer need to be given anything because you've realized everything you need is already inside you. And now you carry it forward, not to teach, not to impress, but simply to live it so fully, so silently, that the world remembers something about itself in your presence. This is the frequency of mastery. This is the rhythm of return. This is the final breath of this sacred circle. Epilogue. You are the law. You are not separate from Source. You are not following the law. You are the law, walking, breathing, humming through time. Everything you desire is not waiting in the future. It is encoded in your becoming, activated through alignment, coherence, and truth. You have not been asked to perform, only to remember, and now you do. If you enjoyed this content, share and subscribe to the channel. Every day we bring new videos to nourish the soul. Thank you for walking this path. Now, walk it as your own.